Hello and welcome to today's deep dive. Have you ever, caught yourself gripping the steering wheel in completely gridlocked traffic, just absolutely venting out loud about the cars around you?
Oh, definitely. Or, yelling at a red light.
Right. Or maybe you found yourself complaining about a micromanaging boss, or going down a rabbit hole in some chaotic corner of the internet, just getting so frustrated that things aren't the way they should be.
Yeah, we all do it. I mean, complaining feels as natural as breathing.
Exactly. But what if every single complaint you've ever voiced or whispered or shouted into the void actually means your brain is literally short-circuiting?
Which is just a fascinating concept. And I'm thrilled to be here to explore it with you today.
So glad to have you, because that is the bizarre, but honestly deeply practical premise of a 2020 essay by Feng titled No Complaints Make Sense.
That a bold title.
It really is. And today, we're going to tear into the mechanics of why he believes every single complaint is completely illogical. And we'll explore how adopting his somewhat eccentric mindset might actually be the ultimate shortcut to protecting your daily peace of mind.
Yeah, because Feng builds this whole idea on a pretty ruthless assumption about people.
Oh, very ruthless.
He basically argues that if you are complaining, you are not a victim of circumstance. You are simply misreading the room. Or, well, in this case, the universe.
On a fundamental level.
Right, on a basic structural level, you are experiencing a glitch in how you process your surroundings.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the text starts out reading almost like a collection of fables, and that concept of misreading the room really comes alive in the first few anecdotes he uses to set up his logic.
Yeah, they're great examples.
He starts with the scenario where a girl walks into a food store. She goes right up to the shopkeeper and asks to buy a bag of rat poison.
As one does in a bakery.
Exactly. And the manager predictably tells her, they don't sell rat poison, it's a food store, and the girl actually complains.
She gets genuinely upset.
She does. She says, "Why do you not sell rat poison? You made my trip for nothing."
Which forces you to immediately recognize the cognitive disconnect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we hear that story and think, well, obviously they don't sell poison next to the pastries.
Right. It's absurd.
Her expectation is entirely detached from the physical reality of a food store. But the author is using this extreme example to highlight a mechanism in the human brain.
Okay, what kind of mechanism?
Well, we constantly build predictive models of the world based on our internal desires, rather than empirical evidence. The girl wanted rat poison, so her brain projected that desire onto the nearest store.
Just completely ignoring the environmental reality.
Exactly.
And he takes that same mechanism and applies it to the animal kingdom next.
Wow.
There's a rabbit who spends its entire day hopping around a cornfield, desperately searching for carrots.
Just looking everywhere.
Right. And at the end of the day, exhausted and hungry, the rabbit complains, "Humans do not care about us." Why do they not grow carrots in their cornfields?
Because, I mean, a cornfield is engineered from the soil up to produce corn.
Yeah, not carrots.
Right. The rabbit's desire for a carrot doesn't alter the agricultural reality of that specific patch of dirt. The friction here, the complaint, happens because the rabbit refuses to update its predictive model to match the environment it is standing in.
Wow, okay. And the third example brings it right into the modern digital age.
Oh, the internet example, yes.
A social media user voluntarily joins a WeChat group that is explicitly dedicated to flirting. They hang around in this group chat for a while, observing the dynamic, and then finally complain to the group, "There is no preaching or talking of Taoist scriptures here."
Which is just hilarious.
It is. They say nobody is sharing cooking skills or healthcare tips. How can you all be so boring?
What's fascinating here is that this one perfectly illustrates the universal blind spot Feng is targeting. We look at the WeChat user, the rabbit, and the girl, and we see people suffering from a total failure to accept defined parameters.
Yeah, they're just completely ignoring the reality of the room they walked into.
Exactly. The author is asking you to consider how often you walk into a clearly defined situation and demand that it caters specifically to your personal agenda.
It reminds me of, someone walking into a hardware store, wandering past all the hammers and nails, and throwing a massive tantrum because they don't sell fresh milk.
Yes, that is exactly it.
You were standing there demanding reality to be something it blatantly, demonstrably isn't. You wouldn't blame the hardware store for lacking milk. You would blame yourself for bringing a grocery list to Home Depot.
And taking that a step further, think about the listener's day-to-day life. Think about the last time you walked into a recurring staff meeting expecting it to be highly efficient and concise.
Oh, I've definitely done that.
And when it inevitably dragged on and went completely off the rails, You probably went back to your desk and complained to a coworker.
Yeah, complaining about how much of a waste of time it was.
Swifeng would argue that you are the rabbit looking for carrots. You walked into a corporate meeting, an environment practically designed to be a cornfield of inefficiency, and expected it to produce a carrot.
Wow.
The complaint isn't a critique of the meeting. It's a confession of your own confusion about where you are.
That is a tough pill to swallow, because it means every time I complain about traffic, I am basically yelling at cars for existing on a road designed for cars.
Exactly. You're complaining about cars acting like cars.
It's funny when we talk about rabbits and hardware stores, but the essay scales up dramatically from there. Swifeng moves from these metaphorical fables to some really heavy, real-world human issues.
He does. And honestly, this is where his theory gets incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, he deliberately forces the reader out of that safe hypothetical space and right into the friction of social and political existence.
Let's look at the scenarios he lays out for this.
Okay, so first, he gives us a worker who takes crowded, uncomfortable public buses every single day. And every day, he watches his boss pull up to work in a luxury Mercedes-Benz.
A very relatable scenario for a lot of people.
Totally. The worker complains, the world is unfair. Why should he drive a Benz while I have to squeeze onto a bus? Then the author moves to marital dynamics. A wife who is deeply ashamed that her husband isn't a high-ranking director general like his former classmates, complaining that she has no face.
Right.
The husband, in return, complains that his wife constantly criticizes him, whining that other men's wives are so sensible.
And then there's the ultimate escalation in the text.
Yeah. A man willingly travels into what the author explicitly calls a dictator's paradise. He looks around and complains, there is no democratic atmosphere here. Why does he have the final say and disregard public opinion? It's grossly unfair.
Those examples raise the stakes exponentially.
They really do.
We are no longer talking about logistical errors like grocery shopping. We are dealing with massive wealth inequality, deep emotional dissatisfaction in relationships, and global political systems.
And I have to push back on the text here because it feels almost tone deaf.
How so?
Well, a rabbit wanting a carrot is a silly, harmless mistake, but complaining about a massive structural wealth gap between a worker and a boss, or complaining that a dictator is suppressing public opinion.
It feels different, right?
Yeah. Are we really supposed to believe that these are the exact same type of brain short circuit as the hardware store analogy?
It feels insensitive to equate demanding basic human democracy with looking for milk next to the power drills.
That discomfort is a totally natural reaction. It bumps up against our deeply ingrained sense of justice. But to understand the philosophy, we have to look at the mechanics of what Xu Feng is analyzing, impartially.
Okay, so stripping away the politics of it. Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, he is not taking a political stance on the morality of these systems. He is not arguing that dictatorships are positive environments or that capitalism's wealth disparity is inherently fair.
Right, he's not endorsing the dictator.
Exactly. What he's doing is dissecting the utility and the logic of the complaint itself. Expecting a democratic process in a place literally defined as a dictator's paradise relies on the exact same flawed cognitive mechanism as expecting carrots in a cornfield.
Because a dictator's paradise is, by its very definition, an environment where one person rules.
The environment operates on a specific set of rules. If you walk into a dictatorship and expect democracy, you have fundamentally failed to comprehend the room you have entered.
You brought a grocery list to the hardware store.
Precisely. The complaint is illogical because it demands that an environment magically betray its own nature just because you showed up with a different preference. Complaining about a dictator acting like a dictator is a failure on your part to accept the reality of the system.
But doesn't that mindset just lead to total apathy?
That's the danger people worry about, yeah.
Like, if we accept the dictator, or we accept the boss and the Mercedes and we never complain, how does society ever improve? If we stop complaining, aren't we just surrendering to whatever flawed reality we find ourselves in?
That is the crucial distinction we have to make between complaining and taking action. Xiufeng's essay is an attack on the passive nature of a complaint.
Ah, the passivity.
Yes. A complaint is simply you standing in the cornfield, refusing to move, and whining that reality isn't bending to your will. It is entirely passive.
You're just talking.
Right. Acknowledging reality, on the other hand, is the first required step for any real action. If you finally accept that you are in a dictator's paradise and that the dictator will never voluntarily offer democracy, you stop complaining.
Because you realize it's pointless.
Your brain stops short-circuiting. And only then can you take actual functional steps. You can choose to organize an underground resistance, or you can choose to pack your bags and flee the country. Both of those are actions based on a clear-eyed reading of reality.
So the text isn't saying don't fight for democracy. It's saying stop being shocked that a dictatorship isn't democratic.
Exactly.
The short circuit is the expectation that the environment should cater to your ideals without you actively doing the hard work to dismantle and rebuild that environment.
A complaint is demanding the environment change itself for you. The worker, expecting the boss to share the Mercedes, is failing to accept the current reality of their economic system.
And the husband and wife?
They are failing to accept the reality of the person they actually married. They are looking at their spouse, seeing all their flaws, and complaining that they aren't a totally different human being.
Just expecting them to magically change?
Right. If they accepted reality, they would either work constructively on the relationship or get a divorce. Complaining is the lazy middle ground where you do nothing but generate internal friction.
Wow. It is a radical way to reframe our daily frustrations, and the author doesn't hold back when diagnosing what is actually happening in our heads when we fall into this trap.
Oh, he really doesn't.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If you accept his premise that a complaint is just a failure to accurately read reality, his medical diagnosis for complainers is incredibly blunt.
It's savage, honestly.
According to the text, if you are someone who complains, after careful analysis, it has been determined that your head must have been kicked by a donkey.
It's a sudden pivot into pure shock humor.
It is. He goes even further. If it wasn't a donkey kick, he suggests that a nerve in your brain has literally short-circuited. Or, my personal favorite explanation from the entire essay, when your mother was pregnant with you, she must have mistaken a contraceptive for cold medicine.
Just absolutely brutal. But he is deliberately using absurdity to deflate the tension here.
Yeah, to lighten the mood after the dictator stuff.
Exactly. By the time we reach the examples of systemic inequality and marital strife, the reader is likely feeling defensive. We want to protect our right to be aggrieved. The author uses this highly exaggerated, insulting imagery to pop that bubble of self-importance.
And he deflates his own ego right alongside ours. He doesn't just point the finger at the reader. He offers this surreal confession to prove he is just as guilty of these cognitive glitches.
And puts himself right in the crosshairs.
Yeah, he admits that he used to complain all the time, but when he finally stepped back and analyzed his behavior, he realized his complaints were nothing more than comical mistakes in his own perception.
And the metaphors he uses for his own past behavior are vital to understanding how he wants us to view ourselves.
They are so weird. He describes his past complaints as being equivalent to accidentally walking into the wrong room and getting furious at the people inside for being there.
Right.
Or mistaking his wife's sister for his wife, looking at snakes and getting angry that they aren't dragons.
Which is just a great visual.
And then the ultimate escalation, he says his complaining was like becoming sworn brothers with pigs.
Sworn brothers with pigs.
We started this journey with a rabbit in a cornfield, and suddenly we are talking about making blood oaths with farm animals.
You really have to ask why he pushes the imagery into such hallucinatory territory. It is a calculated move to strip away the ego. Immediately after these wild confessions, he turns directly to you, the reader, and asks a very pointed question. Have you ever complained?
It catches you completely off guard to be dressed so directly after reading about sworn pig brotherhoods.
Which is exactly what he intended. Think about how your memory functions. When you look back on the last time you complained about your boss or the gridlock traffic or your spouse, your brain usually edits the memory to make you the hero.
Oh, for sure. You always sound like the reasonable one in your own memories.
Exactly. You remember feeling a sense of righteous anger? You felt you were objectively right, and the world was objectively wrong. The author wants to completely dismantle that self-righteousness.
By making you feel ridiculous.
Yes. By equating his own complaints to mistaking a snake for a dragon, he forces you to view your own past grievances, not as valid critiques of a flawed universe, but as embarrassing, comical misunderstandings of how the world actually works.
It makes it impossible to hold on to that feeling of being a righteous victim. You weren't a crusader for justice in that traffic jam. You were a guy yelling at a cornfield for not being a carrot. You were arguing with gravity.
Arguing with gravity is a brilliant way to frame it. You are expending massive amounts of emotional energy, demanding that a fundamental force of nature reverse itself just for you.
Understanding this philosophically is fascinating, but let's talk about the boots on the ground application. Life is absolutely full of complainers.
Unfortunately, yes.
You go to work and your coworker corners you in the break room to complain for 20 minutes about the new company software. You go to a family holiday dinner and your uncle complains about the news cycle for an hour.
We have all been there.
So what does this all mean? How do you actually apply Feng's essay to survive those encounters without losing your mind? Because the text actually provides a very specific survival guide.
It really transitions from a philosophical critique into a manual for, like, emotional martial arts.
The strategy he outlines is almost shockingly simple. Pay them absolutely no attention. The text explicitly says to lend deaf ears.
Do not engage.
Do not engage with the complaint. And most importantly, do not try to reason with them. Because, as the author states, they are fundamentally unreasonable in that moment. They are enjoying making trouble out of nothing.
Right.
The text warns that the more you care about their complaint, the more trouble you are going to bring upon yourself.
This touches on something we could call the empathy trap. When someone we know comes to us with a complaint, our social instinct is usually to empathize. We want to validate their frustration, make them feel heard, or step in and try to solve their problem.
Because we want to be helpful.
Exactly. But Shuifeng is warning us that in the context of a pure complaint, this instinct is dangerous. You cannot solve a problem for someone whose brain is currently short-circuiting.
Because giving them a solution implies they're actually looking for one. If someone is furious that the hardware store doesn't sell milk, handing them a map to the nearest grocery store's dairy aisle won't calm them down.
It'll probably make them angrier.
It will. Because they aren't looking for milk, they're looking for validation of their anger at the hardware store.
They are experiencing cognitive dissonance, and they want you to join them in that delusion. If you try to use logic to explain why the hardware store doesn't have milk, you become part of the friction. You are trying to reason with someone who has, metaphorically speaking, been kicked in the head by a donkey.
Okay, so if you can't reason with them and you can't just physically run away from your uncle at the dinner table, what do you do internally?
There's a trick for that, too.
Yes, the author leaves us with one final, very specific piece of advice. You laugh in your heart. You stand there looking at your complaining coworker or relative, and you tell yourself, wow, this person must have gotten up on the wrong side of the bed today. Their neurological synapses have just completely opened up and short-circuited.
It is about building an impenetrable psychological boundary. By visualizing complainers as people who are temporarily disconnected from empirical reality, you strip away the emotional weight of their words.
It just rolls right off you.
You realize their anger actually has nothing to do with you, or the software, or the news cycle. It has to do with their internal predictive models failing.
It is basically putting on noise-canceling headphones for the soul.
For you, the listener, the daily application of this is incredibly powerful. When you internalize the idea that complaints are just cognitive glitches, their negativity stops feeling infectious.
You don't absorb it.
Right. The text promises that adopting this mindset will keep you from becoming unpleasant yourself, and it will prevent you from absorbing their frustration and exploding with anger in response. You protect your own internal peace, not by debating them, but by privately recognizing the sheer absurdity of what they are expecting from the world.
So, to recap the massive ground we've covered in this deep dive, we started with a girl looking for rat poison in a food store and followed that thread down into the psychological mechanisms of how we map our desires onto reality.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We learned that every time we complain, we're essentially throwing a tantrum because a cornfield refuses to grow carrots. We tackled the heavy realization that even in cases of systemic unfairness, complaining is just passive friction, whereas accepting reality is the required first step for meaningful action.
The required first step.
And finally, we learned the literal survival tactic of the internal laugh, a way to protect our own sanity when the people around us start short-circuiting and arguing with gravity. It is a surprisingly empowering, albeit blunt way to navigate a chaotic world.
The utility of that internal laugh cannot be overstated. But the text also leaves us with something much deeper to chew on regarding our own lives.
What's that?
Well, if every complaint is just a mismatch between our internal expectations and our external reality, if we're all just rabbits demanding carrots from a cornfield, what does that tell us about our deepest ambitions?
That's a heavy thought.
When you feel truly unfulfilled in your life, your career, or your relationships, you have to ask yourself a hard question. Is the secret to happiness simply learning to change your appetite to accept the corn? Or do you need to take the much braver, much harder step of finally packing up, leaving, and finding a brand new field?
Wow. That is a question that requires total honesty with yourself, and it is definitely worth taking some time to unpack on your own. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Shofeng's work. Keep questioning the parameters of the world around you, keep laughing on the inside when things short circuit, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.